and knowledge system provides tremendous solution to the climate change crisis. However, as much as we contribute this much to climate resilience and adaptation, our knowledge and traditional adaptation resilience are not mainstreamed in local and regional policy and legislation frameworks. Therefore, we request this summit to recognize the contribution of indigenous peoples' traditional knowledge, which make them more resilient to climate change. On climate finance for adaptation and resilience, despite the fact that we do play a critical role in protecting the ecosystem that our lives entirely depends on, a recent study has shown that indigenous peoples receive less than 1% of all climate financing globally. Indigenous peoples of Africa continue to be obstructed from direct access to finance due to lack of recognition of our unique identity. Lack of clear policy, legal framework, and complex requirements continue to limit our direct access to climate financing, yet, as I said earlier, we are the most hit by the crisis of climate change. We therefore request for establishment of an Indigenous Peoples Climate Resilience Fund to mitigate against the impacts of climate change. On effective participation, and as climate change discourse continues to gain traction, the indigenous peoples, despite being the most vulnerable group, has continued to face systemic exclusion from decision-making, and also have negatively impacted by the climate intervention, negatively impacted by the climate intervention and response measures, some of which are detrimental to the existence of indigenous people. During this summit and beyond, we request for effective and meaningful participation of African indigenous peoples, including creation of an African Union focal point at the AU headquarters to have an indigenous person focal point who will be handling our matters at the AU. In conclusion, we reiterate again that although indigenous peoples contribute the less to carbon emissions that lead to climate change challenges, we continue to suffer the most. We are therefore here with solutions and experiential lessons from Mama Africa. We look forward to have our concerns, priority, and contribution captured in the summit's outcome document, which is the Nairobi Declaration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the summit is steeped in democracy, and with good reason, because the climate crisis affects everybody. In the last 3 days, we have had very robust engagements during the 11th Climate Change and Development in Africa Conference, held between the 1st to the 3rd of September, just ended yesterday. And this is a forum convened by the AU, UNECA, the Africa Development Bank, as well as the Kenyan government and the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, and to bring to us the voice and sentiments from the civil society is our next speaker, Dr. Mithika Mwenda. Let's put our hands together for Mithika.
Exponential cost in the future. This summit should also convey a bold, unequivocal message from Africa that it is not a forum to end the industrialized countries, to escape their historical responsibilities, and transfer their burden of action to the victims of their actions, but a platform to once again renew our call to honor their commitments on deep and genuine emission reduction, adequate support to vulnerable, and support the communities at the front line of climate crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, we want to extend a hand of partnership and take front seat in the inevitable transition to low-carbon, climate-resilient, fair, equitable, and ecologically just development pathways. We should also seek to change the narratives, and I think I have heard His Excellency President speaking about that every time. And we need also reciprocal actions from our partners in the North and urge them not to shift the goalpost like they have done before. I hope, Your Excellency, you will agree with me that we are doing so much, but there is a problem. We have the critical natural resources, for instance, including vast mineral resources, cobalt, lithium, and all others, which will drive this transition. How to exploit these resources, then, should be the conversation we should have. How we leverage them will determine whether we repeat the curse of the minerals driving the carbon-addicted industrial revolution, that is through fossil fuels, which has brought us the current challenges we have. Or we will choose to start with an opportunity to shape our future through a resilient, prosperous, inclusive, and fair way. This is really our time. And thank you again, Your Excellency. When we were in South Africa during the African Parliamentarian Summit on Climate Policy and Equity, I told you, you are our general. And I told you, now below there, you are our soldier. Let us work together, and we promise our commitment to that process. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Mithika, for speaking on behalf of the civil society. Now, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we move on, noting that the vital agenda pursued this week, the ACS will play a crucial part in the global fight against climate change and have a massive impact in the upcoming global initiatives around climate action. And one of these is the COP28. And Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are aware that during this summit, we have the African Climate Week convened by the UNFCCC as part of the regional climate weeks, again, that build momentum for COP28. And we have here with us none other than the Executive Director of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, Simon Stiell. Let us put our hands together to have the statements from Simon. Welcome, Simon.
Excellencies, ministers, colleagues, friends, I'm honored to be here at the Africa Climate Summit and the first of 4 regional climate weeks of 2023. I want to thank the Kenyan government and personally President Ruto for his leadership and vision in bringing us here together. And I want special recognition for Minister Soipan Tuya for her work and efforts in helping to organize both the summit and the climate weeks. This summit for Africa, by Africa, will help us tackle the climate crisis we see and feel all around the world. I speak to you today not just as the head of the UNFCCC, but as the former minister from a developing country. So let us talk about what we can do to stabilize the climate and build resilient societies in Africa and throughout the world. Development is, as it should be, a priority. I know personally the destruction that climate-related disasters can wreak on years of development. But the world is asking for a lot. Develop, but don't do it in the carbon-intensive way that we did in the past. Therefore, it is a global responsibility to collectively work out how we do that. Every day this week, we'll be putting our heads together to discuss how to build resilience to climate risks, transition to a low-emission economy, and collaborate on solutions, transforming our economies through a just transition that benefits all sectors of society. Africa, the equal partner in this endeavor, is offering its huge potential. We already know innovation in Africa is astounding. So how can we accelerate this development through green technology and energy? And in doing so, taking the necessary actions to keep in 1.5 within reach. First, we must address finance. Climate action, just like everything else in life, costs money. Finance should be viewed in the context of mitigation and adaptation, in addition to all of the other things. COP28 will be a critical moment to hold the line on temperature rise at 1.5 degrees Celsius. The world needs to reduce emissions by 43% from 2019 levels by 2030 to achieve this. And the IPCC reports the impacts will be far greater at anything above this, especially in certain parts of the world. So for starters, to hold this off, we immediately need to see the delivery of the pledged $100 billion, a doubling of adaptation finance, the substantial replenishment of the Green Climate Fund, a global finance system, both public and finance, that is aligned with action and green finance. At COP27, I committed to ensure the Secretariat does all that it can to support parties to deliver on their commitments. I see our role as catching what you, parties, throw and shine light on how you can, together, throw it higher to get it in the basket. I also committed to maximizing the opportunities available to us to build collaboration throughout the year between COPs. This Africa Climate Week is a good example on delivering just that. In the past, we used to have only 3 to 4 mandated events associated with the regional climate weeks. Now there are 20. We've been working to cluster them, not just